Very bad week.
Yeah. Very. Okay. I am going to ask everyone. I can just do it. There's only a couple of you. I'm going to mute. If you're not on mute, I'm going to mute you. Boom. 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 I'll keep myself on, obviously. Okay. I just kind of recap where we were holding. He was the Rav was having this whole discussion about the differences between philosophers on the one hand and the way we get closer to Hashem on the other. By the philosophers, it's just an exercise in knowledge, but for us, it's more about getting closer to God. And this is kind of like the topic he was dealing with. And I want to show you one slide that has to do with the with that topic that Rav Avinar has in his book. So let's just do a screen share. Whoops. And hit share. Okay, this is the first thing. I'm starting here where it says Klalo Shel Davar. This is like the second paragraph here. Y'all can see the screen, yes? Just shake your heads yes or no, please. Do you see the screen?
Sorry, yeah, I can see the screen. Sorry, can you just relate this to where we are in the book?
Yeah, we're going to be in the beginning of paragraph 20 or Kaf when we start. It's just before that. You can let us all know, let everyone know where we're at.
Page 445.
Page 445. I'm going to write that down so I can refer to it when we start it. Okay, so just before this is the comment of Rav Avinar. Klalo shel davar, the general idea or general rule is, ha'idiyal shelanu hu dveikut b'Hashem v'tuvo. Our ideal is connecting to Hashem and the goodness of Hashem. V'ha'idiyal shel philosoph hu chokhmah v'dat. And what is the ideal of the philosopher? Wisdom and knowledge. We don't negate, by the way, we don't negate, God forbid, wisdom and knowledge. It's the basis of Judaism, knowledge and growth and getting close to Hashem. But by the philosopher, he's saying that's the goal. That's not our goal. He's using this in a metaphorical term. The philosopher eats from the tree of knowledge. But we eat from the tree of life. Obviously, the tree of life includes in it the tree of life, of knowledge. Masha enken etz hadat, as opposed to the tree of knowledge, a no kolel et etz chayim does not include the tree of life. Mish yochal me etz hadat, someone who eats from the etz hadat, yamut bimhera, could quickly die. V'chen izbira Zohar, so the Zohar explain, shay isur eno lechol me etz hadat, the isur for Adam and Chava, and by extension, in a metaphorical sense for us, was not to eat from the Eitz Hadat, was not don't eat from the Eitz Hadat, elechol me'etz hadat b'nituk me'etz hachayim, but rather to eat from the tree of knowledge, but completely disassociated from the tree of life. Lechol me'etz hadat levado. Zeh chidush atzum shachayim kololim gam da'at. This is a tremendous chidush that life, or to eat from that the life includes knowledge. Yotze, it turns out, Shapilosophim heim lemaaseh idealistim, that the philosophers are idealists. Love all this beautiful Hebrew here. Philosophim, idealistim. Afa idealim enam matara. Ela emtsaim hasigat megamatam hahitaluta sichlit. Their goal is to grow in knowledge. Our goal is to grow in knowledge as well, but it's not a final goal. The same, I use an example, and I've used this, I think, maybe just last week, that when Bnei Yisrael left Mitzrayim, their goal was not to leave Mitzrayim. Their goal was to go to Midbar to get the Torah, and then ultimately go to Eretz Canaan, who Eretz Yisrael. But that wasn't the goal to leave Egypt. It was an emtsa'i. It was like an intermediary step to get them to their goal. So too, by the Jews, the chokhmah and the dat and all that, the wisdom and knowledge and bina, all that is a process that helps us to get to the goal of closer to Dveikut Hashem. Now, there is a very strong belief and misunderstanding, at least many, many years ago, and to some degree even today, that the way a person gets closer to Hashem is on a different path. Now let's take a look. I want to take a look at the idea that's mentioned in the very beginning of Mesilat Yesharim. And I know that some of you were in the Mesilat Yesharim class many years ago. So obviously you remember all this anyways. So here, he's in the middle of a sentence here, but I'll explain. He's talking about that how people misinterpret what it means to be pious. He says, Ad she'damu rov b'nei adam, she'chasidut talui b'amirat mizmorim harbe. That some people think, how do you get closer to Hashem? Oh, you say lots and lots of Tehillim, viduyim arokim me'od, say long, long series of vidui, of saying to Hashem what you've done wrong, tzomot kashim, or heavy fasts, utfilot kerach v'shelag, going to mikvah, icy mikvah, or into snow. Kulan dvarim asher ena sechel noach behem, v'nadad shoketa. All these things are things that just common sense says is, I'm paraphrasing, is ridiculous. V'chasidut amiti hanirtzeh v'nechmad. The real desirable, true chasidut is rachok mitziur zeh sichlenu, is very far from our intellect, or that we picture. Ki ze davar pashut. Wait 1 second. Ki ze davar pashut. I lost the place. Milta doloram yalededa inish lavadate. Something that is not on your mind, it's that you don't think about, you're not going to do. In other words, if I'm not cognizant of whatever mitzvot hatluyot ba'aretz, like truma and maser, so it's not going to phase me. I'll go into the store, I'll buy something, I won't even check to see if they took trumot and masrot. ואף על פי שכבר קבועים בלב כל אדם הישר תכלותיו ויסודותיו, אם לא יעסוק בהם, ירא פרטיו ולא יכירם, יעבור עליהם ולא ירגיש בם. What he's talking about here, which we're not going to get into, is that without the knowledge, you're not going to be able to properly keep Torah mitzvot, because how are you going to know? Let's say if a person doesn't know that it's asur to do X, or you're supposed to do Y, so then how you get closer to Hashem through those acts or lack of those actions? So I put that on the screen just so you can get just a little bit fuller of a picture. So we're saying really two things now. Number one, that on one hand, the philosophers, their goal is knowledge. On the other hand, our goal is knowledge, but to get to close to Hashem. And number two, the opposite direction is the misguided individuals who think that they're going to get closer to Hashem, and not through knowledge at all, but rather through self-torture. And that's not the word he uses, but it's going into ice cold mikvah and other things like that. And obviously that's not the way to do it. So now we're going to pick up on page 445, paragraph kaf, number 20. So, Amar Kuzari, the king said, Shakaha or hahu asher mesaper. Remember, we were talking in the last couple of weeks, more than a couple of weeks ago, about the various levels of light, the or nakuv, the penetrating light, which is the light that there was the connection between Hashem and Nevi'im, that gave the Nevi'im, the prophets, the power and the ability to truly hear the word of Hashem. He says, it seems that light has set. Shkia shadat meracheket shira'e od, and set in such a way that it doesn't seem like we're going to have that back again. You're going to see it again. Ve'avad aveda shehashavata ena ola b'machashava. That it's something, it's lost forever. Something that will not come back again. Now, what's he trying to tell us? He's in a sense saying that even though the philosophers may not be the be all and end all, but it seems like, look, if you guys are claiming that the Or Nakuv was that which connected, this penetrating light of Hashem is what connected Am Yisrael to Hashem, and the Nevuah and everything else. Well, that's kind of gone. So the next best thing is the philosophers. At least that's what he's saying right now. Take a look at Kaf Aleph, number 21. Amar Chaver, Einenu shokea ele be'einei mi she'eino ro'eh otanu ba'ayin pekucha. The light has not set. He's speaking obviously metaphorically, like the sun setting, but it means this light, this Or Nakuv, it does not set only to one who looks at us with an uneducated eye. If he doesn't see us with an educated eye. And instead looks at, and he's going to deal with this at length in a few minutes, instead looks at Am Yisrael's lowliness and pain and suffering, and they're being all spread out. Shenishka Oreno. And they look at that and they say, yeah, I guess the light that God really was shining on Am Yisrael has set. Umigudulat zulatenu vasagato laolam umashlo banu ki yesh lo or. But the ones who are greater in this world and who rule over us, they're the ones now who have the light. He's referring, obviously, we're going to see in depth, referring to the Muslims, referring to the Christians. So he's saying, in a sense, and this is going to, we're not going to get into depth on this, but there is a concept, we'll see a little bit of it soon, of what's called replacement theology. Replacement theology among Christians is the idea that whereas they believed the Jews were the chosen people, but it came a time where the Jews got God angry enough that he replaced the Jews with the Christians, and they're the chosen people now. That's called replacement theology. So in a sense, that's he's kind of hinting to, even though we're going to see a little bit more in depth soon. Let's take a look at the next slide. Here. Tov. Echaver meshiv. The Chaver, the Rav, is replying to the king that this kind of thought process is not right. Meaning to say, well, because the Jews are in the situation they're in, and it seems like the light of between Hashem and Am Yisrael is gone, therefore the philosophers are the next best thing, and they're right. Yeshno or be'uma Yisraelit sheino kava leolam. There is a certain light among the Jewish people that will never be extinguished. Omnam le'et ata, but for now, enenu bolet, it's not very pronounced. The chazak, nor is it very strong, where like it was in the time period of the prophets. But there still is this light that rests inside or exists inside of us. Adain lo nevuah mamash, right? It's not true nevuah that we have. Makom, a little bit of a bit of prophecy, like prophecy or form of prophecy. Vehen ha'emunah v'adveikut b'Hashem. He comes back to this theme. Where does our ki'ilu nevuah come from? It is actually in our emunah, in our getting closer to Hashem. I was teaching a girl yesterday. She is almost 11 years old. I was trying to explain to her how come our minds cannot understand God. I was trying to explain the difference between finite and infinite. And then I said to her, okay, let me ask you a question. She's a religious girl. She believes she doesn't have any, there's no, how do I know God exists? I asked her, how do I know Hashem exists? How do I know? So she started saying that she's thinking, she says, well, we can prove it because we have emunah in Hashem. I thought that was a really pretty good answer for an 11-year-old, not even yet an 11-year-old girl. And what the Kuzari, what the Rav is telling us here is that level of that emunah that gets us closer to Hashem is a form of a level of nevuah. The fact that we're messed up and we're low on the totem pole, say in the world, doesn't prove anything. It's an external situation. It doesn't show us prove anything. Truth is that we are the source for all the light for all generations. And everything that we absorbed from prophecy in our past and the Matan Torah has not gone to waste. Look at what he says. Rav Aviner claims that take it off here, that the light that came from the time of the Nevi'im, that also came from the time of Matan Torah, continued in us somehow and remains in us. That's one of the reasons we learn Navi. We talked about that in our Navi class many times. But the idea being that this is the Rav now talking to the king, you might have wrongly made an assumption here. And that assumption is that because you see the situation we're in, how the Jews are downtrodden. Remember, we're talking in the 12th century, 13th century. And guess you probably think that we're not, there's nothing there anymore, that the light's diminished and therefore the nevuah is no good, and therefore the connection between us and God is no good, and therefore really much we have the best is like these other countries or the other religions, the Christians and the Muslims potentially. So That's what the Rav is saying. He says, you can't think that way. So now how does he respond? Let's look at number 22, Kaf Bet. Amar Kuzari. So the king responds as follows. Lo heveti mizer raya. He said, I didn't bring this as a proof. He's kind of like thinking out loud. He says, look, I see these two nations, referring to the Christians and the Muslims, who disagree. Each one is powerful. Each one has a land. Each one has leaders. Each one is looked at as a powerful nation. And we can't say that both of these extremes are both right in their beliefs. Only one of them can be right, or neither one's right. But we can't say both the Christianity and Islam are both right. You're going to see where he's going with all this. Now, I'm not going to repeat this. This is a conversation we had at least a year and a half ago, which is known in the Christian quote Bible as the suffering servant. It's used by Jews. Jews for J, and it's used by people who want to convert Jews as proof that this is that we should be accepting Yeshu and everything else. It's called the suffering servant. But this whole discussion that the Rav and the king had way back when earlier, I think it was in Mamar Bet, but I don't remember for sure. He says, look, I remember that you taught me that humility is more appropriate for divinity, for godliness than greatness. He says, look, I know that these two nations, the Christians and the Muslims, are great and they're massive and they're all, I don't know which one's right. Maybe one's right. Maybe they're both wrong. But in addition to that, you also taught me that humility is something very good, and that ga'ava is that anava, humility is good, ga'ava is bad. Fugamken galui b'shteh. It's also clear or apparent in the other nation, these two other nations. Ki hanotzrim einam mitparim b'melachim v'lo b'giborim v'lo b'ashirim. He says, wait a second. I know you guys are downtrodden and you're pretty chill, but we got to take a look at the other nations, the other religions, because the Notzrim, the Christians, don't glorify themselves with kings and mighty warriors and rich people. Who do they look at as their heroes? The people that followed Yeshu, Yashki. Even before the time that the religion was established, meaning the apostles, who, by the way, were Jewish, who followed Jesus, and they made that's like their leaders, and they were very simple and humble people. And maybe look, they're the ones with humility, and you already taught me that humility is a good thing. By the way, this is very unusual that the Kuzari speaks so much in one paragraph. Until we get to the end of the paragraph, you're going to really see his point. Not only did they Christians look up to the apostles, but also in general, when the Christians were in some form of exile, they went into hiding. Sometimes they were murdered wherever they were found, meaning that they visavlu, they suffered al chizuk emunatam because of their beliefs and faith. Inanim muflaim min habuz v'hereg, they were despised, they were murdered. V'hem asher bahem mitbarchim u'mechadim mekomotam u'mekomot harigatam. And where they had martyrs had died, that's where they put up andarta, they put up memorials, and that they found to be very special. So first thing, he's making the following case. We didn't get anywhere yet. He's making a case. He said, you taught me that anava, that humility is the best thing. And that's the way to get closer to God. Well, let's take a look. The Christians, this is from his perspective now, obviously a few hundred years ago, the Christians look up to not to kings and not to warriors, but they look up to their apostles, who were simple people, who were humble people, and to whom do they look as their I don't want to say idols, that's not the right word here, but they're important people, as people who gave up their lives to their Christianity because that was to serve God. So that's the Christians. Let's go to the other side. The Yishmael, those who were Muslim, until they received help that they were also suffering a lot. ובהם הם מתפארים, ובשפלותם ובמותם על עזר דתם משתבחים, לא במלכים המתגדלים בממונם וגדולת עניינם. He said that the same thing. He says, similar to the Christian world, that the Muslims didn't um, look to great kings and great warriors as being their be all and all. But again, they also suffered a lot, and those people suffered, the ones who were looked at as being true Muslims. They didn't look at the elevated people, but they looked at the people who wore tattered clothing, with like worn out clothes. They would eat people who ate barley without getting full. Their purpose of doing that was to set themselves apart for God. So now what he's done is he said, Christians, humble people. Christians suffered. Christians look up to the people who suffered for their religion. Muslims suffered. Muslims don't look up to the warriors, they look up to the humble people. Muslims look up to people who died for their religion. Sounds pretty good. That's exactly what you've been telling me, my dear Rabbi. If I were to see the Jews acting in such a way in God's name, I would say that they have an advantage over greater than Malchut Beit David. I remember what you taught me in the essay about the idea of being humble. That the light of God only devolves upon those who humble themselves before God. Okay. So what he's basically done is he has turned himself, turned the statement or the words of the Rav over the past many, many chapters and turned it against him in a sense. He said, you've taught me in multiple cases. Remember, we first talked about the Jews and the philosophers and what was better and how to get closer to Hashem. Now he says, wait, hold on a second. We also have this other issue that you taught me this idea of shiflut and suffering and downtrodden and anava. Those are the ways that people get closer to Hashem. And I see that among the Christians. I see it among the Muslims. When I see it among the Jews, it's not so much. And I don't see them doing it l'shem shamayim. And my words, not his, but he does say the words. Use l'shem Elokim. Let's get a little bit deeper understanding now. And let's listen to it. Let's hear from Rav Aviner. Okay. Make this just a wee bit bigger. Okay. Y'all can see that? Or should I make it bigger? No, I don't need to make it bigger. Or yes, I do need to. No.
No, you don't.
Okay. Moving along.
We have to unmute ourselves to answer your questions. And
I know.
Beforehand, you said shake your head or nod, and I was also with no video either.
So you're too quiet, and I can't see you. But other than that, that's great. Okay, back on mute. Here we go. Tov. Okay. Ata now. By the way, I don't like assuming things. I want to point out that the word ata with an aleph means you, and the word ata with an ayin means now. Okay. Ata now, minasa Kuzari lavin b'derech me'atacher. Now the Kuzari is trying to understand in a kind of a different approach, a different way. Anachnu ro'im et shtei hadatot ha'acherot matzlichot. We see the other two religions that they're actually successful. Omnam, but however, yesh kan mashu lo barur. There's something that's just not clear. Sharei shtei hadatot halalu cholkot zo al zo. These two religions are different from each other. They argue with each other. Ushtehen ke'achat meira lehen ha'atzlacha panim. Sorry. They both at the same time bring light to an internal type of a success. Amadan etan, and their status is strong. V'lo yitachen she'ha'emet nimtzet b'shnei ha'ktzavot. We can't say that the truth is they're both the Muslims and the Christians are right about their beliefs. Oshi bin Natsut, or be Islam. It's either got the Christians have to be right or the Muslims have to be. Or maybe neither one. Al kol panim, nevertheless, lo yitachen shatzedek im shtehen b'shaveh. We can't say that the truth lies with both of them. Sharhein makrishot zod zo. They contradict each other. Mikan, and from this, or from now, or from that, hamaskana shahatzlacha eina emat midah leemet o sheker. Now we can conclude that being successful is not a good measuring stick for truth or falsehood. Just because the Muslims or just because the Christians may be very numerous, that's an understatement, and just because maybe they have a tremendous amount of power in the world, and just because blah, 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 and they're very successful, doesn't mean that they're correct. יש לנו ויכוח ארוך ומפורסם עם שתי הדתות האלו, הללו. We have a very long, well-known ויכוח, dispute with these two religions, שטוענות שהיותנו מסכנים, בזויים, שפלים ומדולדלים. They claim that because we are misken, there's a misken, there's no good word for that in English that I can think of. I know there is, but I don't know. We're also the underdog. We're lowly. Is proof that Hashem has pushed us away. Remember the idea I told you, at least in the Christian theology, the replacement theology, that we've been just tossed aside by God because just look at who we are. He says the truth is, see, pathetic. Yeah, I like that. Pathetic works well. Cynthia suggested that the word for misken is pathetic, like as a misken. Yeah, I like that. Good. He says, but however, there is a little ring of truth in this. Shalo b'sofo shel davar, because at the end of the day, inyanenu hu lekadesh shmo b'tachtiot haaretz. What's our goal here? The kadesh shem shemayim, to bring glory and honor and to bring Hashem to this world. להופיע בכל שיעור קומתנו בעולם הזה, בגבורה מלכותית אדירה. There should be people should look at the Jewish people and say, look at this, imagine the time of the Beit HaMikdash, where the power and the beauty and having a Kohen Gadol and everything else, how that was a physical manifestation of the glory of Hashem in this world. וזה עדיין אינו מופיע בתקופת הגלות. It doesn't exist. We don't see it in our exile. הנצרות טענה תמיד, the Christians always claimed, ששפלותנו וגלותנו באו לנו כיוון שלא האמנו באותו האיש. The Christians claim that our lower status in our exile was due to the fact that we didn't believe in Yeshu, Yimach Shemo. ומאת השם הייתה זאת, and it's all a direct act of God that we are where we are because we didn't believe in Jesus. שלא להשמידנו, not to destroy us, אלא, next slide, להותירנו בשפלותנו, to keep us, to leave us in our lower state, להראות לכל העמים מה עונשו של מי שאינו מאמין באותו האיש. That we're used as the example. You see what happens when you don't believe in the J-man? You see what happens? You're going to be like the Jews. And by the way, I've heard this from people that is definitely is a statement that is made among Christians. I can't say Catholics. I don't know which denomination, but it's used as a derisive statement to those trying to be taught the right way to be good Christians, that if you're not, you're going to end up like a Jew. That's terrible on multiple levels. Al kain, therefore, ein linhog be'ivelet ulamin b'tzad hachazak, sheken en kol raya shu tzodek. Don't believe that just because someone has the power that they're right. Imagine for a second, it just popped in my head, it's not necessarily a good example, the bully, right? A bully in the schoolyard, a bully in a prison, a bully at work. They may have the power. They may make a person or a group of people in fear, but doesn't make them right. So the same thing here. Just because the Catholic Church is monstrous, and you have over 2 billion Christians, you have over 2 billion something Muslims. It's a pretty scary number when you say there's 7 billion people on earth. Doesn't make them right. So too the Kuzari knows what it says in Navi. That on occasion, that generally, sometimes, that specifically the lower status one has is proof of the greatness of God, or the greatness, the divine greatness.
Rabbi, I think we can I think we could back that up with the very popular, I would say, argument or maskana of Anashim that, compared to Christians, how many Nobel Peace Prize winners do we live? How many, billionaires do we have? How many, the list goes on, that it's so disproportionate that it's really not in numbers. It's more in quality. And
100%. I think that if you take the pasuk, which is meant for war, but it doesn't only mean that. They come with their horses and their chariots, and we come with the name of God. Doesn't mean we come with just God's name. We come with our horses and we come with our chariots, but we have God on our side as well. It says that they have their horses and chariots in the metaphorical sense, adding on to what you said. The Christian world, the Muslim world may have all this power and everything else. But look at, like you say, the chokhmah of the Jew, the wisdom, and what it's done to the world, how the Jews in the land of Israel in 70 plus years, how they've literally changed the face of the world. And it truly is and the influence, absolutely. Very good call. So he says, this quote here is, Rak etchem yadati mikol mishpachot ha'adama al ken efkad alechem et kol avonotechem. Anachnu am shurav habriut v'rav hacholi. He says, we are a people who are very healthy and very sick. Liot chole hu siman mufak lebriut. The person who's sick is an absolute sign that he also has health. What does that mean? It shows that the body is fighting off an illness. Chom, mugle, adrabah. He said, let me explain to you what he's saying here. What do you mean that a person who is sick proves that he has health? That sounds counterintuitive, right? But when a person has an infection, now, if anyone here is a medical professional, you can correct me if I'm using the wrong term. Their white blood count may be sky high when they have an infection, and the body has to fight that infection off. That shows that the body is working. Briut doesn't mean that you're sitting at home and you don't have a cold. Briut means that your body is functioning the way Hashem wants it to function. And anything beyond that is a choli. But he says sometimes it happens where a body is sick, shalom neda, cancer, some other machala, shalom neda, where when a person doesn't even know what's going on in the body, they don't show any symptoms. At that time, the person appears to be healthy, but they're really sick. It's when a person exhibits symptoms that shows the body wants to fight and to be healthy again. What's this mashal? That these religions contradict themselves. Minei ube is Aramaic for inside and of itself. Means they contradict within itself. When they say when they say that success is a sign of their truth, the veracity. On the other hand, then the other say, it's really good for a person to be humble and modest and low. And they call people kadoshim who are at all those who suffered by going and following in Jesus' footsteps. The simlam hu hatzlav, and their symbol is the cross. Shekolin, the whole idea of the tzlav, the cross is hagardom, the hangman's noose. Makom harigato shel oto haish, hilu derech mashal. I'm going to read the sentence and I'll explain. As if, like in a mashal, hainu anu osim semelis god lo mechevel hatiyah shel hakedoshim. If we were to worship, if someone were to take a piece of rope, where in the Akko prison, when the British killed Jewish prisoners before the establishment of the state, and this gardom, which you can actually still see, it's pretty powerful if you haven't gone there, and take some of that rope and tie it around ourselves, and we would worship that. He says the same thing is what the Christians are doing when they worship towards the cross. So what's he saying? What's the internal contradiction in Christianity? On the one hand, they say, what's the proof of their truth and the veracity of their religion? Look at where we are. Look at our hatzlacha. Look at how great, magnificent. Look at the Catholic Church. Look at our money. Look at everything else. On the other hand, they say, but it's good. But a person is supposed to be shafel, ubazui, low and humble. They're not. For any of you who've either been at the Vatican, have seen online pictures of the Vatican, have seen any of the stuff, I've never been there, but I've seen pictures. You can't help but say like wow, there's a lot of cool stuff there. There's a lot. If you ever been to, and I have been to the, what's it called in Russia? The Hermitage. The Hermitage. I've been there. It's mind blowing. I mean, the opulence and the grandiosity and the beauty of the art and the things that they have at the Hermitage. But that's not us. That's not us. They're showing. They say on their side, look at our hatzlacha, look at our success. And they all say, oh, you're supposed to be very humble. As long as it's not us, the Catholic Church leaders, we have to be humble. We're okay with that. I'm adding that in. Im ken. Take the next paragraph. Im ken. Yesh bi'adam yachas du'erki. They have a double, two different levels of how do you say arachim in English? Oh God. How do you say arachim in English? Help me out. My mind just went blank. Something that's important to you. It's not good. Here, let's see.
A double valued relationship.
Values. Thank you. Yes, values. Correct. They have two different like a double scale of values. מצד אחד, למדו מיהדות שהצניעות, הענווה והשפלות דברים ראויים הם. On the one hand, they learn from Judaism that tzniut and being low and subservient and humble are good things. They do this, but derech chikui, like an imitation. They're not doing it because that's who they are. It's just external. From mouth and out. But inside, they're filled with cruelty and murder. Let's say Pere Adam is what Esav was referred to, like a wild animal, who worship power. So it's, which is it? In order to answer this internal contradiction, they wrote in their works, she'adam tzarich liot anav lo shitet lechayav l'shashniya l'kamakehu. They wrote that a person should be humble and turn the other cheek. Ulam etoivim, but the enemy, meaning son'e Hashem, mutar larog v'la'anot b'achzariyut she'en lo gvulot. Anyone who doesn't believe like we do, who are enemies of God, just be cruel and kill and do whatever you want. No holds barred. כך נמצאים כופרים העולים ללא הרף על המוקד, והכל לשם שמיים. Says and they do it, and they say they're doing it, they're God forbid, blowing up a bus, they're stabbing, they're killing, they're carrying out the crusades. It's all l'shem shamayim, it's all for the sake of God. Al derech hash'ala, romut el bilshonam, v'cherev pifiyot bi'adam, u'adin bi'islam, shemishabech et ha'sevel v'akoshi b'chayim, et ha'pashtut, ha'oni v'adalut. He says now he's coming back to something that the Rav said, which is that wait a second, the truth is that the Kuzari, the king, he has a little bit of a claim against us, Hayudim. We really don't necessarily comport ourselves in the most humble of fashions. He does admit about the higher level, so to speak, of these other religions, but not in our anava, our humility. That's not necessarily our strong point. Nor does he see proper mesirut nefesh among the Jewish people. No, this is way before the Holocaust he's referring to. So hold on, don't come back to me at that. Anu anochiyim, we are egotistical. And we are very much subservient to the things of this world. By the way, for those of you who are in my Navi class, this is exactly what we're about to talk about. And this is what this idea about Avodah Zarah, what's a modern Avodah Zarah. Therefore, the Kuzari is having a hard time believing that the light of God still exists in us. Zo kushya chazaka me'od. It's actually a very strong question. The chaver yiva'er v'taretz ota b'piska haba'a. And the chaver will answer it in the next paragraph. Okay, so let's get off the screen share and go back here to the text. Okay, I want to do is read Kaf Gimel, which is number 23. My guess is you're on page about 446, 447, something like that. Somewhere around there, because we started on 445. I just don't know how much is on one page. I probably should just buy the copy so I can know what page everyone's on. Okay. We're somewhere between the beginning of the book and the end of the book. And that much I'm sure of. So, okay. Amar Chaver. Hadinimcha sheticharfenu baze miknei shanachnu sovlim hagalut mibli tolada. He said like this. You're right to a degree that we are suffering this whole galut, but without any real benefit. Let me explain to you what his introductory statement means. This actually also reminds me of something we learned once before in the Kuzari. Now, I'm going to quote, as they say, chapter and verse, only because I've quoted this not hundreds, dozens and dozens and dozens of times over the years. In Ma'amar Bet, in paragraph 25, after the king asked the rabbi, said, "You keep telling me Israel's so important in your life, and all you do is you daven towards the direction of Israel, and all your things you daven about Israel. How come you don't live there?" So in paragraph 25, the Rab says, "Hovashtani hamelach, you have embarrassed me. You're right, and all of our tefillot," he says at the end of that paragraph, "are only ketziftzuf hazarzir, just like the twittering of birds." What Rabbi Yehuda Levi does in this text is he shows where we're fallible. He shows where when there is a claim against us, he doesn't just brush it away, sweep it under the carpet. He says, look, you're right. We talk about being Israel, and we're not. At the end of his life, Rabbi Yehuda Levi does make aliyah. We know this. There's a famous story, whether it was true or not, is that when he first arrived in Israel, he first got off his horse or his donkey or whatever, got out of his Uber, and he got out and he bowed down to kiss the ground, and an Arab horseman ran him over and killed him. That's the supposed legend. True or not, I don't know. I'll tell you a funny story. I may have told you this story before. There are two guys sitting in shul, and the rabbi starts quoting something and telling a story about the Chavetz Chaim. And a couple of minutes later, he starts telling a story about some other great gadol in history. And the guy turns to the other and says, in the middle of the sermon, he says, "I don't understand. Do you think all these things are true?" So he says, "I don't know if they're true, or I don't know if they're not true, but they're certainly not telling these stories about you and me." Meaning that, there are certain stories that may come out, whether they're true or not, they're believable about certain gedolim, right? So we know what Rabbi Yehuda Levi meant, and Israel meant to Anochi b'mizrach, libi b'mizrach, Anochi b'sof ma'arav, right? So his love and desire to be in Israel is so great. So what's he telling us here, though? So Rabbi Yehuda Levi puts in the words of the king, the Rav, you're right. Not only are you right, in a sense, he says, we're wasting our galut. We're wasting this time. Because we're in galut because we did something wrong. This goes right back now. We're going to turn this back to Sefer Melachim, Bet, Perek, Yud Zayin, exactly what we're holding in the Navi class right now, where Yirmiyahu is telling basically Am Yisrael, but especially the northern kingdom, who's now gone into galut. Look what you had. You had one opportunity after another, and I sent you Nevi'im, and I sent you people. I told you you're doing wrong, and you still did the wrong thing, and now you're out of here. So we're out of here. We're out of here for almost 2,000 years. And he said at this point, we weren't 2,000, but now we are almost 2,000 years in galut. And he says that, in a sense, what you're saying to me is you're right. We are low. We are in a makom shafel. And we're suffering in this galut. But mibli tolada, with no result, no benefit, nothing's happening. Aval chashavti b'chashuvim mimenu. שהם היו יכולים לדחות הבוז והעבדות מעל נפשותם, במילה, שיאמרוה מבלי טורח. He says, there really is a way out. He says, you're right. I agree with you to an extent. But I want you to think about something else. Do you realize, he said, that a Jew could stop this pain and suffering by just saying a word? Now, what does he mean? If a person is not Jewish and they want to become Jewish, we know that it's a very long process. It's very involved. If a person wants to become a Muslim, basically all they have to say is that he believes in Allah and that Muhammad is his prophet. By saying that in front of, I guess, a couple of witnesses, he becomes a Muslim. It's it. He just has to make a statement. By the Christians, you have to just accept Yeshu as, in the Trinity, and I guess you eat a couple of vaflim, drink a little bit of Manischewitz, and you're good to go. Meaning there's a very easy way out of all the sevel, of all this pain and suffering that the Jews have gone through over the centuries. Just a couple words. They'll be free, and their hand will be at the upper hand over those who were causing their employers. It doesn't mean their employers, I mean the people who were over them before. They don't do this because they want to keep Torah. That alone, he says, is the fact that the Jews in general have not looked for a way out and jump ship and just very, very easily join the other team or teams. That alone is a sign of their connection to God, the one keeping Torah mitzvot, and should act as a form of kapara for all the averot that they do. It's a very powerful state when you think about it. This statement, or this short little first part of the paragraph, gives Rav Aviner a number of things that I want to expand on. We're not going to do it today. We'll do it next week, Bezrat Hashem, having to do with this whole idea of Mesiut Nefesh. What is Mesiut Nefesh? What does it mean? Not just literally giving up your life. We know that the person, God forbid, has a gun to his head and says, kill somebody or be killed. We know you have to give up your life. That's the form of Mesiut Nefesh. But we use the expression Mesiut Nefesh, Mesiut Nefesh. What are we talking about? What does it indicate? What does it show us about our Judaism? Bezrat Hashem will deal with that next week. As a reminder, tonight at 8:00, and if you don't have the link available somehow, I'll be happy to send it to you directly again. Make a siyum shas on Yerushalmi, Lilu Nishmat for father, who tonight and tomorrow is the first yard site. As I say, tempest fugit. The time really has flown. It's true. I thought that with Corona, it would seem like it's a 30-year year of Avelut, but it's absolutely flown by. That I'm saying tonight and tomorrow, the last Kaddish, Ezrat Hashem, for a very long time, except for Yardside. So Rav Aviner will be speaking for a couple minutes. For those you know, Daniel Be'eri, he's the principal of the school I work at, Amit. Fine individual. He'll be speaking for a couple of minutes. I'll make the siyum and say a couple of things at the end. And it's because I had a lot of people asking, you're talking tops, hopefully half an hour at tops. So you're all invited if you're able to be there. And I do know at the same time as Levaya is being streamed on YouTube. I know there's a link that was sent out today. Whatever you want to do, choose either one is a truly a mitzvah, especially to be for Levaya. So, okay. Wishing everyone well, a good day. And for some of you, I guess I'll see you later on today. Bezrat Hashem. Be well.
Bezrat Hashem. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Be well.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. It's great.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be well, Ati.